So I think there's a lot of excitement for Avengers Doomsday, but there's also equally the amount of concerns or doubts for this movie. So I just wanted to go over 10 major ways I think the movie could disappoint. And really starting with the first point here in relation to Doctor Doom, I think in a lot of ways Doctor Doom is really what's carrying the hype for this movie, because I think a lot of people are interested to see how intriguing he will be in this live action adaptation, but I think it's very easy to also imagine how Doctor Doom could really fail to live up to the hype. And I think this could be due to a few different reasons. I think for one, the design or the physical appearance of Doctor Doom is going to be a pretty big step in this equation, and I think that's really crucial to get right. I think if Doctor Doom has a pretty poor or an underwhelming design and really isn't a captivating villain just in terms of a visual standpoint alone, I think that really is going to hurt his presence. And looking at some of the leaked concepts that we've gotten recently, even though I think both of these aren't really true or accurate to what he's going to look like, I think if he does look like possibly either of these options, which was one being a recent leaked picture that's more than likely faked, but also you're having a birthday card, which I think is also just not really based on the appearance of what Doom will actually look like in this movie. But I think a lot of this really does beg the question. I think if Doom looks kind of similar to either of these designs, it could really come off poorly on the big screen. But I would also say the other end of that is looking at the original concept art, which shows Doom in a lot stronger light. So I think something in this direction would ultimately be the right way to go. And I think also looking at the past version of Doctor Doom in live action, I don't really think that was super successful for the villain. So I think that's also something to learn from. And also another example of how the physical appearance of Doctor Doom can go wrong. But going back to the concept, I think that really worked here. I really think the medieval angle to this would be something that would be neat and would be effective. I also think really focusing on the Iron Man suit and just turning it green or maybe a little bit meaner and using a lot of those same aesthetic designs that you got from the original Iron Man suit, that really combined with a medieval tone, I think could be a really effective version of Doom here. But I think any deviations from this could be a little bit risky. I also think something that would be really crucial for Doom's appearance is his mask. I think a weak mask, or maybe just him not really wearing it a whole lot, could be something that hurts his presence too, because I think he's a lot more scarier and terrifying with it on. And I also think the mask with a projector or a voice effect that it would naturally create is really something that would also add to Doctor Doom's presence. So I think the absence of his mask could also hurt some of his iconic lines as well. If we're looking at other iconic villains such as Darth Vader or Thanos recently in the MCU, or even someone like Bane, I think a lot of their iconic lines are really due to that distinguishable voice. And I don't know if just Robert Downey Jr. talking by himself in this light would really be enough to make this interesting, or it would also maybe just be too similar to hearing Tony Stark talk before. But I think if we're looking at the Iron Man suit, there is a lot more captivation from when he's wearing his mask, and that really applying the more megaphone effect. And then I think another thing for Doctor Doom is maybe if he's underpowered. I think in theory, Doom here should really be Iron Man plus Wanda in terms of the magic, which would really make Doom a powerful threat here. But I think anything less than that would really be undermining his character. But going on to the next point, this is also in relation to Doctor Doom. I think a poor backstory could really be something that significantly hurts this film. And I think something too complicated could really be a step in the wrong direction in terms of obviously connecting this to Tony Stark. I think that is a pretty hard route to do successfully, and I think it might have been better to potentially even have casted a new actor for Doctor Doom, so he could have just been a distinct character, because I really don't see a I am your father moment from Empire Strikes Back in terms of doing some sort of a big reveal or plot twist where Tony Stark in the MCU is revealed to be somehow adopted, or there's maybe some sort of an explanation for Victor Von Doom being the real variant of Tony here. So I think doing anything too extreme would really be too off-putting. But I think somewhere in the middle is the right way to go with this. I think just a simplified version of him just being an evil Tony Stark variant would be okay here. And in terms of that specific execution, I think some of that could be used for the plot's advantage. And I do think it would be interesting if he maybe used his similar appearance to Tony Stark to really fool the Avengers members. And going on to the third point here, I think another thing that might be too much for this movie is the introduction of all of these new groups. And I think this is really a big deviation from the past Avengers movies with these three groups that are going to be introduced here. And even besides the groups, I would say a lot of these really haven't been properly developed. For one, you're going to have the Thunderbolts movie coming out pretty soon, which I think is still semi-close to the Avengers Doomsday release, looking in comparison to the past MCU phases. And I also think the Thunderbolts aren't really as widely known in the Marvel comics. And then you also have the Fantastic Four movie coming out this summer. And I do think the Fantastic Four are a little bit more popular in terms of their comics. But a lot of the live-action Fantastic Four movies in the past haven't been too hot. So I think it's definitely possible that it could be a little bit underwhelming here again. And maybe this is just also too late in terms of introducing them for an Avengers movie when you could have got a Fantastic Four movie a year before this. And then also you're having the introduction of the X-Men, which are also a little bit more widely known, but I wouldn't say they are nearly as popular as some of the core Avengers members. And I think also there's been just such a big gap between when these original X-Men live action movies released. So I think it could have been potentially better to have done an X-Men movie a year or two before this and maybe introduced new actors or versions of all these characters, and then they could connect better to the MCU here. So I think all of this in combination is just going to create a team of people with too many members to keep track of, and really a lot of their screen time is going to be forced or cut too short. And then the next point, this is pretty similar to the previous one, but just in terms of the Avengers specifically, though, outside of these new groups, I think the Avengers by themselves are going to be spread a little bit too thin, and I think that is still problematic because a lot of the absences from the former Avengers members are going to be so crucial here, because we're talking about the potential absence of Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Wanda, Captain Marvel, Iron Man, Steve Rogers, Black Widow, Colonel Rhodes, Hawkeye, and or Nick Fury. It is potentially possible that some of these do end up still making an appearance, but in terms of the casting news with the chairs that we were given, and also just knowing some of their deaths from the past movies, I do think that the Avengers are going to feel a little light here. And I think you can't really have all of the core members forever, but I really think leaving out the current Avengers members, such as Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, or Captain Marvel, I think are crucial absences, as they should really be the key to rebuilding the Avengers going forward. And I think if they don't end up still being in the movie in some shape or form, waiting to include them until Secret Wars, I think could really backfire here, because you're sacrificing the appeal of this movie, which is really crucial in order to build up a lot of momentum for Secret Wars in the future. And then the next point is also a step up from this, but I think in terms of the new Avengers members or the new group members that you're adding to the equation. I think a lot of this could get lost, and maybe you're not adding the right members that could really gauge and attract a lot of fan interest. Again, looking back to the casting chairs, you're also missing Deadpool and Wolverine, and I think given the success of that movie, these should really be the focus for some of the new inclusions for the Avengers members, and I think it would be really exciting to see them with the other Avengers if you didn't have so many other groups coming into the equation here. And then to also cover another point in relation to the Avengers or the real good guys of this movie, I think another clear problem could really be not having a clear standout or leader member for the Avengers. I really think Tony Stark and Steve Rogers are going to be big shoes to fill here. And even regardless of those two characters by themselves, I think you really haven't had nearly any setup for this Avengers movie in terms of the new Avengers members, whereas before you had about 3 Avengers movies, including Civil War before Infinity War, so we really got to have a lot of proper development for how they play as a team, and I really don't think you're getting that now, if at all. So I really think it would have been crucial, whether in the Captain America Brave New World movie or even before that, to really start setting up the Avengers and seeing them together on the big screen, seeing Sam Wilson leading them on the big screen. And this could have been done through end credit scenes, or just maybe not stretching a lot of these characters too thin, but having a lot more of them tied to even solo projects. So I think a lot more setup to really establish a new proper leader would have been something that could have countered this. But now stepping away from the Avengers, I think another crucial point that does have to be addressed for this movie is that you're not going to have the Infinity Stones really being the symbol in terms of the stakes or the plot building or the world building. And I think the stones really did create an easy dynamic to follow the plot. Not to mention them just being aesthetically interesting or naturally interesting with a lot of their different and unique powers. But I think they were just really easy to follow along with in terms of, that Thanos is trying to collect all of these stones to get enough power to basically take over the world. But here you obviously can't repeat the use of the Infinity Stones. So I think you do have to create some sort of a new plot symbol to follow along in terms of what Doom needs to get or collect in order to take over or to create Battle World. And I really don't think you've had nearly enough development to establish any of these new elements like you did with the Infinity Stones in the past MCU phases and movies, because there was really just a ton of lore in terms of how those stones got passed around. And in terms of Doctor Doom, maybe if you're going the Beyonders route, you haven't had any real setup for that. Or even the TVA, I do think, has had a good amount of setup, but if that's really just pushed to the side in this movie, I think it's going to be confusing as to what exactly Doom is going to try and do. And even looking at something like the TVA, I think in terms of the Loki show, you probably don't have enough viewership for that show for a lot of people to understand all of the elements of the TVA. And then in relation, that really leads to the next point, which is just a lot of this is going to be way too confusing. I think Endgame really started a trend that's gone too far in terms of the multiverse world building. And I think the multiverse is just too confusing within itself in relation to time travel or quantum physics. And even though you don't have to understand all of the exact sciences and laws of all these different things, just having all these alternate universes, I think, is going to be a little bit too complicated to follow along with. Plus the potential introduction of evil variants and all of these new groups, I think, could just be too overstimulating, and you're not just getting the standard conflict that you might get in a superhero movie. So I really think there has to be some careful consideration made into the execution of a lot of the major plot points. And I think in relation to it just being too confusing, I think a lot of this is also in relation to the improper setup for this film. Even though there is a lot of anticipation for this movie, I don't think there's really been nearly the same amount of end screen scenes setting up Doctor Doom like you did Thanos. Maybe in Fantastic Four you're going to get some of that, but it's hard to say until that movie comes out. And I really think it would have been a better idea to also start teasing him sooner, along with creating the new Avengers sooner. And I think Doctor Doom would have been a great tease for Captain America Brave New World, or even sooner than this. And I think this is also due to the Kang situation or the Kang fallout, which is why you haven't really had nearly the development of Doctor Doom, because there was a good chance that the next Avengers movie was going to focus on Kang. But I really think you shouldn't wait any longer, and hopefully in both Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, you are having some proper foreshadowing of Doom. But going to the last point, I think why this movie could be a little bit underwhelming is just due to an overall MCU fatigue. I think Infinity War is obviously the big movie, and it is going to be pretty tough to beat. I think you have done a lot of the major plot points already in terms of using the Marvel source material, and there's just also been too many projects that have really diluted the brand. And Marvel as a cinematic universe doesn't really have the same new or exciting feeling that it did before, since it is really established so well now. And I think it just also, in simple terms, amounts to you can't really keep doing the same things forever. And I think that, in combination with a lot of the fan favorite characters missing from the Avengers, is going to be a notable problem for this movie. But it is possible that a lot of people are looking forward to seeing another real strong Avengers movie, and I definitely think there is still a demand for this. So I do really think there are a lot of reasons for why this movie could be successful on the other hand. But I also did another video covering some of the things I think could be really crucial for an interesting or for a massive Doomsday movie. But feel free to let me know your thoughts on this, and I'll see you later.